Hi, Clint Adams here. Just been kind of got off an interview earlier around my book, which is obviously around suicide prevention, and it kind of got me thinking about, what more we can do in this COVID pandemic around mental health and helping people get through this process. Obviously, the book's written more around, helping children at school level, but ultimately, the more I got thinking about it, and the more I kind of go through the headspace of how we become adults, and then the behavior that kind of stays with us over long periods of time, and especially if people have had trauma and struggle with depression and struggle with things all their lives, and have that family background, which also is another risk factor. I kind of just think, I guess, how do we do better at this? How do we help people who are sitting at home who maybe you can't afford to go and get counselling, and spend proper one-on-one time, and really focusing on their, I guess, themselves a little bit. I mean, there's kind of two trains of thought in my head around this. You're obviously sitting at home in isolation, especially down in Victoria, where they're doing it a lot tougher than us up here in Queensland. And I guess there's an opportunity to kind of explore a bit more about yourself in that isolation period. So, I guess what I'm thinking is how can I help with that? How do I get people to maybe go inward a little bit? Because when you are in what I call red brain, where people are struggling and then that survival mode, there's certain things that's happening in your brain. So your amygdala is getting stimulated, and you get all this crazy stuff happening with your brain waves and this kind of thing. And so you're in that survival state. So you tend to look in and just focus on yourself all the time, but not necessarily in the best way around, well, why do I think the way I think? What have I learned over the years? What trauma in the past? What things in the past that's impacted on your life at that point where you're feeling like that? What can you do differently? And the big part of what I write in my book more for the kids is around developing resilience, developing I guess better ways of dealing with stuff. So it's no different, obviously, when we get to adulthood around looking back, but looking back in a positive way, and doing that in a really good sense. So I guess the purpose of this is just to start off with. I'll do probably a series of these, just short grabs, so that people don't get overwhelmed with it. But in a nutshell, first thing I normally do, and I've dealt with people who've had PTSD or stuff like that, is just get them doing a thoughts diary. And the reason for that is, when we do a thoughts diary, it causes you to do analytical work. So obviously thinking about your thoughts means you're analyzing something, and then you've got to write something. And that changes your focus from being in the amygdala, red brain, or fight or flight or freeze, which is what normally happens. If you're kind of stuck in that fight or flight mode, then you tend to just think the same way, and you have the same body chemistry reactions going on, and your cortisol levels are getting higher, and it's not good for you long term if you get stuck there. There's nothing wrong with emotions, obviously, but there's something that can go bad if you get stuck there. There's a really good saying that says, no one ever drowns from falling in the water. You drown by staying there. And with mental health, if you constantly sad, or you're constantly angry, you're constantly defensive, or you get that anxiety and worry, it's not good for you. So I guess part of this process is just about giving you some insight around how you think. I don't think a lot of people, or not as many, certainly when I've run sessions with groups and talk about red brain, blue brain, and some of the understanding how your neurons are wiring and firing together. When you think the same way over and over and over, it becomes a habit. That we, when we're doing this as a conscious effort around, for the next few days, maybe just start thinking about, catch it. If you are struggling at the moment, just get a little notebook. Every time an unconscious thought pops in there, all I want you to do is write it down. One line, no more than that. But it starts you using the analytical work. So basically, when you're in red brain, all the blood drains from you, or not all the blood, but a lot of the blood drains from your brain and goes into your muscles, getting you ready for fight or flight. And so what this analytical stuff does is it kind of reverses the gears a bit, because when you are thinking in an analysis mode, you're actually using a different part of the brain, a bigger part of the brain that I call blue brain, which is that frontal cortex. And essentially it forces you to now pump up blood back up from the muscles into your brain, so it can do the analysis work that it's designed there to do. So it's slowing that red brain response, and it's giving you a slightly different response. So the neurons that were wiring and firing together when you were thinking about that red brain response is now slowly different, just a little bit different, but it's enough to interrupt. So you're slowly moving away from that constant wiring and firing in the same way by thinking of the same ideas over and over. So this is about you breaking some patterns. It's just the first step to breaking those patterns. But essentially, that's what you're trying to do when you're doing any kind of counseling, when you're doing any kind of interventions, about getting the person to focus on something in a future state, which does require that analytical work. So hope that's been useful for now, but that's the only thing you need to do as part of your homework over the next couple of days. And then I'll bring out the next installment. We'll cover off some other stuff in the next step, so we can kind of help you thinking about those things. All right, have a good one.